Welcome back to the GamecockScoop.com podcast, the official podcast of GamecockScoop.com on Rivals. I'm Caleb, joined by Alan. It's been a few weeks since we've been on here. We took a little break with the holiday and stuff. So probably the last time you heard from us was right after the bowl game, which we broke down. We are still going to talk a little football today, but obviously the seasons have transitioned. So start to talk a little basketball as well. Even though on the men's side, at least you might not want to. But before we get into that, a big part of the early winter, at least from a football standpoint, is what happens in the portal. We've seen the portal be kind to South Carolina over the years. We've seen some pretty significant losses over the years. One in particular, you got Mitch Jeter playing in a national championship tomorrow night. So
yeah,
that'll be interesting, right? He had a game winner to get there, so good move on Notre Dame's part, I guess. Anyway, let's look at this 2025 portal class. But actually, before we look at who is coming in, any departure that I guess surprised you or feels like it could be a big impact going forward, before we talk about who did come in?
Not on the surprising part, but the loss of Robbie Ashford, I still think does make things a little bit more complicated going into next year in the quarterback room, just because that was your backup and you needed that at a couple points this year. And I know they addressed that. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, but that's kind of the one. I mean, I think you hit on Elijah Davis a couple times ago. We recorded that he might have had a role in the D tackle room, but for me, it's Ashford. He's the one who played the most of the guys who are gone.
Yeah, or you could go all the way back to October and Bengali Kamara maybe in that linebacker room, although we'll talk about it here shortly. South Carolina has picked up a couple of linebackers in the portal that could maybe make that loss not sting as much. But honestly, if you look to who South Carolina lost in this cycle compared to pretty much every other offseason since Beamer has been here, I would say least impact of all of those off seasons. I think every year it's gotten a little bit tighter, I guess, in the way that they've been able to handle attrition. But yeah, I mean, you're coming off of the best season under Shane Beamer, and you're trying to keep that momentum going. I mean, obviously, one of the big gut punches a couple years ago was you end the season with a win over top 10 Tennessee and top 10 Clemson, but then that portal cycle, you lose Marshawn Lloyd and you lose defensive end that's at Oregon or went to Oregon for 2 years. Jordan Birch, and some other kind of heavy hitters, and that kind of deflates the balloon. I think at the very least this offseason, no balloon deflated from that standpoint.
Oxygen, nothing like that.
So let's look at who is coming in. Really quickly, let me run down a couple of names that maybe we haven't mentioned on the podcast since we were last here. On January 6th, they pick up Boaz Stanley. That's an interior offensive lineman from Temple. Troy. Sorry, yeah. Wrong T. And then
they both wear red. It's fine.
Yeah, it's close. And then also probably going to talk about him a good bit today. You get running back Rashul Faison from Utah State. That's on the 7th of January. On the 10th, you get linebacker Justin Okoronkwo. Is that
I think that's how you say it.
That's an Alabama linebacker, highly touted, good size, 6'3", 228. Hasn't done a ton at this level yet, but that's one you take a swing on. I think Saban recruited him out of high school. You have a Devontae Miles, defensive lineman from Bowling Green. That's on the 11th of January. And then Brandon Cisse, is that the way we decided it goes?
Cisse or Cisse, I think. I'm not exactly sure, but the cornerback who used to play for North Carolina State.
Right. And that was on the 13th, so just last week. Pretty big addition there. I think probably immediately slots into the two deep, if not a starter role for South Carolina. So I think that's everyone that you might not have already heard about, at least from us. Let's look really quickly at a couple of superlatives and let me know if you have more to add than the little list I have here. Who would you say is set to make the biggest impact from the portal class in 2025?
Yeah, I'm going to go way back to the very first one they actually landed back in mid-December. I think Nick Sharp's going to be a plug-and-play guard for South Carolina. I think there's a chance he could move to center just because they don't really, I don't want to say they don't recruit centers, but through the Beamer era, they have kind of moved guards over there, whether that's Vershawn Lee, whether that's, Nick Gargiulo came in as a guard and moved to center. Um, I think there's a chance he could play center. I think he's going to slot in at guard. He was one of the better PFF pass blockers in all of the ACC last year. 2 years of eligibility left. I think you get a guy like Nick Sharp because you're losing all three interior linemen, and you want at least one of them to be able to just plug and play.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to go with Jalen Brown, who is the defensive end out of Missouri. I think he has a chance to slot in as that starter opposite Dylan Stewart and hopefully take a step forward. I don't know that he's going to make quite the impact that a Kyle Kennard did this past season, but I also don't know if you need him to, as long as Dylan Stewart takes that step forward. And then between Brown, some of the guys you have coming back, and are hoping to develop a little bit further, I think you can hold down the other side.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's one where you just kind of have to trust the Sterling Lucas evaluation because Brown really didn't play that much at Missouri, but he, 4-star recruit, came in with all the bona fides. You have to just hope that you get him, one, with Sterling Lucas, and two, opposite a guy who's going to be seeing double teams on every snap, and you can make that work.
Definitely. Who are you looking most forward to from a long-term standpoint? So maybe they make a impact immediately, but they're a little younger, and you could see them really developing into something special over the course of the next few years.
Can we just caveat this and saying we're probably both thinking Aaron Nolan, but I'm going to say someone else because, you get a 5-star quarterback, and I think you all kind of assume he's the guy after Sellers, and he's got the talent to be an NFL guy one day and all that, and we just don't know. So I think Nolan is what we're all thinking in the interest of not just saying the 5-star quarterback from Ohio State. In terms of a long-term, huh?
So I think that's fair.
Yeah. And not to say that Nolan isn't going to be a long-term impact. I just don't want to be boring because I think that's obvious. I'm going to say Sean Murphy, the linebacker from Florida State. I think that's another one where you trust the recruiting, you trust the evaluation. I think over the course of time, he could develop into a player. You slide into that linebacker room who plays a lot. But there's a lot of, I think this class is a lot of kind of longer term. It feels like I don't want to say full of a class with some Vandrevius Jacobs types, where maybe they play a bit this year, but they are still have a few years of eligibility, and you hope it pops long term.
Definitely. On that same note, I mentioned him already, but Justin Okoronkwo,
Yep.
Also a redshirt freshman, I believe, linebacker out of Alabama. So obviously still plenty of time to develop. He also is an interesting case where he played football in Germany. So I think in some ways he's still getting used to not to say that German high school football isn't as competitive as maybe high school football in the South, but it's probably not, right? So just getting used to real football. Sorry, Germany. I'm sure it's coming along. I'm sure it's going to be great eventually, but it's just been happening longer here.
You just pissed off all of our listeners who play high school football in Germany.
So yeah, I mean, he's got all the metrics. He's got the size. He's got the speed. And you just hope that you can kind of develop all that from there. What about an underrated gem, someone that maybe people aren't talking about as much, but actually could be pretty significant?
Yeah, I think he was getting talked about a little bit before the most recent ad of Cisse. But I think Miles Norwood, the corner from Ball State, another guy that I think people were pretty excited about before you added a Power 5 guy at the same position a week later. He's got experience at Ball State. We've seen guys come in from the MAC and produce, even in that secondary. Why am I blanking the safety who transferred in from Central Michigan 2 years ago, or Western?
Oh yeah, what was that guy's name? I remember that.
He played pretty well, and was part of kind of flipping that room from some of the Muschamp guys over to Eamon and DQ Smith.
Yeah, he held it
I'm just
down.
having
Definitely think DQ
no,
Smith
okay.
had
I'm
more
saying Miles
upside.
Norwood. I trust Torian Gray's evaluations. I think you can make an impact quicker when you're not right on the ball. And I think he's going to have a chance, especially on special teams too, to impact. And while you're doing that, I'm going to look up the safety's name because that's going to drive me insane. But
Great.
go with your underrated.
Yeah, so another kind of earlier ad. This was back in mid-December, but tight end
Devontae
Jordan.
Reed.
Who was it?
Devontae Reed.
Devontae Reed. Yeah, that was yeah.
Central
He
Michigan.
he definitely over the course of the season, I think, showed that he didn't have quite the speed to keep up in conference, and DQ Smith eventually supplanted him. But I think he was a very nice bridge there for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, my underrated gem, tight end Jordan Dingle from
Mm-hmm.
Kentucky. One, I think that's just like a pretty big position of need. You have Joshua Simon graduating out. I do think Michael Smith showed some really good things this past year as a true freshman, so should continue to develop and play a big role there. But yeah, Jordan Dingle, and I think he might continue to be underrated even through the season because he does those like little things that get underappreciated from tight end. Sometimes he's not necessarily going to be quite as explosive, I think, offensively as Joshua Simon or maybe even Michael Smith, but he can catch it and make some things happen in space. And also, I think he's a really good inline blocker and stuff. So I think immediate piece that's going to slot right in.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's where you need bodies, like you mentioned, with all the tight end room. He's got SEC experience, which I don't think you can discount either. And I think he's a kind of a change up from what you have with Michael Smith in that room.
All right, I labeled the next one as head scratcher, but I do want to like put it as a caveat. Like I don't think any of them fully. I would say that was a bad ad or that ad makes zero sense. But are there any that kind of like raised your eyebrow or you're like, huh, I didn't think that they were really targeting that position, or it doesn't seem like that this person is an SEC ready, at least at the moment, sort of player?
Well, it's not that I don't think they were going to target the position or that I don't understand that it was obviously probably the position of need, but I think just from a philosophy standpoint, the Gabriel Brownlow Dindy, that's the defensive tackle from A&M, is interesting to me because so much of the Beamer era in the portal has just been about production, right? Like all the receivers they brought in last year were guys who produced and put up big numbers at group of five schools, a Jared Brown, a Delvon Campbell, I guess they did take Findrevius Jacobs, but a lot of those guys, Gage Larvadana, put up numbers. You think about getting a Rocket Sanders and Oscar Attaway. Like so much of the blueprint is guys who have put up numbers. And Gabriel Brownlow Dindy has one solo tackle in 2 years of college football at Texas A&M, where I think you like the body type, you like the recruiting rating, you like the fact that he's been in an SEC weight room and he kind of he gets it. But it is a break from, I guess, the norm or what they usually look for just in a guy that's been in college this long and really hasn't made an impact almost at all. He's got, like I said, one solo tackle in 2 seasons.
Yeah, I think that that's a good point. Like you said, A&M's had a pretty great interior defensive line the past few years, so you can't completely
Right.
blame taking a chance on someone that maybe was buried in the depth chart or whatever, but still has the skills. But yeah, I mean, you look at the other defensive lineman that was taken in this class or in this transfer period, Devontae Miles out of Bowling Green. Obviously, he's having to step up a level in competition. He's maybe a little bit undersized compared to Brownlow Dindy, who's sitting at 310, while Devontae Miles at 275. But he's played significant snaps in college, and um, you know that seems to be the way that they've gone most of the time. So that I think that's a good one. I'll just mirror that one. I don't really have anyone else that stands out. I mean, the Aaron Nolan thing raised my eyebrow just because you would think that he wants to go to a place that he can compete. Um, and I'm wondering, yeah, what that means for Lenore Sellers' future. Um, because I think obviously Sellers is going to be slotted in as the starter going into next year, pretty much regardless. But uh, is there a indication that we can read from that maybe if he has the season we think he could, he'll be gone after next year? or if he's not, maybe Nolan is in the portal again. I don't know. That's gonna be an interesting little side story to watch, I think.
Yeah, we broke that down quite a bit when he first signed at South Carolina, Nolan. But yeah, I think that's a bet on Lenore Sellers being so good next year. An NFL team's going to pay him a lot of money, and obviously you want that to happen. It probably means South Carolina had a really good year if Sellers is in that conversation. But if that doesn't happen, if Sellers is, let's say good but not great, not NFL first round good, I don't know what that means for Aaron Noland either, and I don't know if he even knows what that means for him yet, to be honest.
Definitely. All right. Do you have a MVP for the offense and an MVP for the defense? Let's start on the offensive side. Who do you think is the best signee so far?
Yeah, I think it's Nick Sharp, but just to say a different person than who I already named for the biggest impact. I think Rasul Faison's going to have a chance to be a big part of this running back room. Obviously, you're losing Rocket Sanders. You don't really know who RB1 is going to be. Highly productive running back at Utah State. I know it's going to be a step up from the Mountain West of the SEC. But I think just in terms of a guy who could make it a very immediate kind of MVP type impact on that side of the ball, I'll take the guy who rushed for over 1,000 yards last year.
Yeah, for sure. Adding 1,000 yard rusher. I mean, that's mine too. So we don't have to beleaguer the point, but I I think he probably slots in as the starter, but it'll be interesting. And I also think if either of the returning guys beat him, then that's a good sign, not a
Yeah.
bad thing. So bring him in as competition. If he wins the job, then great. You have a new best running back on your roster. And if he doesn't win the job, then I think it's going to push those guys that are returning to up their game even more to try to beat him out. So,
Yep.
and then what about on defense?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the last guy in the room. I'm going to say Brandon Sisse. I think you can see the talent there. He's got kind of the Power Five experience. You saw other SEC schools were after him. It was big for South Carolina to land him. And then you combine all that with what Torian Gray's done with DBs and the fact that there's going to be at least one open corner spot this season with OD Fortune leaving. I think that's probably your defensive, MVP of this class.
Yeah, and I'm gonna agree with you again. I think it's very notable that he took visits to Ole Miss and Florida as well in that same week, and then chose South Carolina. That's a testament to Beamer, his staff, Torian Gray, Darren Usher, and yeah, I think should make an immediate impact. It's going to be interesting what sort of flexibility that gives them too, because I think you have some of your better athletes at corner right now. When I'm thinking of a Vakari Swain or a Jalewis Solomon, do they try out either of those guys at nickel? Do they move
Yeah.
them to safety so that they don't have to move Kilgore to safety and he can stay at nickel? It'll just be interesting what those two corner ads do for the overall DB room and landscape and the sort of cross training they do there.
Yeah, I think that's a good problem to have, but it's still something for Torian Gray and his staff to kind of figure out.
Yeah, definitely. The portal period is not officially closed. In fact, I know South Carolina is in it with a Penn State running back and a Penn State receiver. Both of the names escape the top of my head right now. But yeah, the playoff teams have a little bit of extra time to enter the portal until after their season ends, obviously. So there's still some of those guys out there, and a few more probably will enter after tomorrow night. And then anyone that entered the portal last month that hasn't landed yet is still kind of searching around. So there could be a couple more ads in this little period here. And then, of course, there'll be a big period again in the spring. Did you see any of the discussion around the reforms that some of the SEC coaches were saying they wanted to make about the portal period?
Yeah, I saw something that I think they basically just want one portal window, that they're kind of tired of. Okay, it's December, but if you're in the playoff, it's January, and then also it's April. But then if guys are enter in April, they can still join up until the semester starts. I get it, but I also don't know exactly how that works when you're still working on a college enrollment calendar and kids need to be where they're going to be before they can, the semester starts. And that's the whole point of the December window now, is that kids move in between semesters. I don't know how you fix that, but I am all in favor of getting all this to one window and not spreading it out. I know coaches are too.
Yeah, I mean, it keeps us from having to constantly pay attention to it too when we'd rather be paying attention to other things. But I agree with you. I don't know if it's a feasible reform to make. And on the other, like the extra thing is, I think it would just up the illegal tampering that goes on.
Yeah.
If there's just more of a period where you're not really supposed to talk to someone, but there's an advantage if you do find a way to talk to someone's agent through your agent or whatever, then I think it's just going to cause a bigger uh, mess that you're going to have to figure out how to police. And as we know, the NCAA is not the greatest at policing. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But as much as it is annoying the way it is now, I also don't know that you can get out of it super easily. Shall we talk a little basketball?
Yeah.
If we have to. So let's start with the men, and then we can end on a happy note. So the men fell yesterday 82-62 at Oklahoma. That is the fifth straight loss for them, all SEC games, so they haven't won a conference game yet. And it comes off of this week where last Saturday they very nearly beat an Auburn team at home who is number one in the country, lost by 3. On Wednesday, they very nearly beat a pretty good Vanderbilt team at Vanderbilt, lost by 3. And then they hung around with Oklahoma. I mean, it was a 5-point game with about 6 or 7 minutes left. And then Oklahoma went on a 15-0 run yesterday and made it look like quite a blowout. So I would say they've been pretty competitive, at least these last few games, even though the final score doesn't reflect it in that Oklahoma game. But they've been unable to get over the hump. And the big thing to talk about, and it's not surprising given the injuries that they've had to Jamari Thomas and Miles Studi, they are struggling with turnovers. They in the game against Vanderbilt that they only lost by 3 points, they had 25 turnovers, which the broadcast said was the most by any SEC team in a conference game in 3 years. And you still only lost by 3. I mean, that's a game that you should have won by all intents and purposes. And then yesterday, it's hard to call it an improvement, but it definitely was a sizable improvement. They had 15 turnovers, which is still not good, but better than 25, I guess. Is this just the fact that you have Jacoby Wright as your pretty much only ball handler with experience, and maybe it's something that over the course of the season you'll see improve as they let these young freshmen like Arden Conyers and Cam Scott get more and more minutes? I guess Conyers is a redshirt freshman, but you know what I mean. Or is this just something that they're going to probably deal with all year and is ultimately going to sink them, you think?
Yeah, I think the combination of everything we've talked about before SEC play, just with what you lost off last year's roster, not having a Talon Cooper, a Michi Johnson, a BJ Mack, and trying to replace all those guys, plus you lose 2 starters to injuries, not just small injuries. Miles Studi has blood clots in his leg, and Jamari Thomas has a sprained knee. Like it's not like these guys are just dinged up either. So, yeah, I think I don't necessarily think it means last year was a fluke or that Lamont can't get anything done. But I do think you're pretty close to the point where you just have to kind of write this year off and see what you can get out of it just from young players and development. And, I think you can get better. I think, Thomas can get healthy, Studi can get healthy. Maybe you can find some momentum towards the end of the year, but I don't, you still don't have the horses for it in the simplest way possible. You're looking at a game yesterday where Austin Hero and Benjamin Bozeman's Verdonk, neither of whom are on scholarship, are playing in the first half of an SEC game. And it just kind of tells you where the rotation is right now, and you don't have the depth for a lot of these games.
Yeah, I think it is interesting that you have a lot of young guys playing. I mean, you sort of talked about is this a lost season? I think you're getting pretty close to that point as well. But can you still build with some of these guys for the future? I mean, we're looking at a Jordan Butler who's a sophomore. We're looking at an Arden Conyers who's a redshirt freshman. We're looking at a Austin Harrow, like you said, a freshman that's playing. Colin Murray Boyle's still just a true sophomore, and just based on, I mean, they're leaning really heavy on him. I think he's playing pretty well, but just based on the way the season's going, I don't know that he seems like he's immediately going to leave after this season. Um, Hard to say at this point. Does Nick Pringle have any eligibility left or no?
He is going to be pending the JUCO Diego Pavia waiver thing.
Okay. Yeah, I thought maybe that he had a chance for still having some. And then again, freshman Cam Scott, sophomore Morris Ugasuk, who has been a
Yeah.
bright spot, I guess, in this mess lately. Had a career high on Wednesday night, scored another 15 yesterday. So he's kind of stepped up when they've needed points. And he seems to be finding his shot from the outside. So I guess in some ways, most of those names I read, you can see a path to them being back and pretty good next year. Add some things in the portal to fix some of your holes, and you could see this kind of turning around pretty quick. But it's hard to have much hope in season that you're going to see anything major shift, right?
Yeah, I think you hit it. You want to see Morris continue doing what he's doing, especially with the shot. I mean, he's developed into quite a 3-point shooter this year. I want to see more of Arden Conyers, honestly. He wasn't playing much before Studi got hurt, but he's played 20-ish minutes every game since. I guess that's been, 4 games now. I like Arden Conyers. I like the look. I think the redshirt year did him some good. I think getting him out there more is going to be beneficial long term.
Yeah,
But also, I think that's what you're talking about this year is just things like that.
Yeah, he's had a nice stroke on a couple of outside shots too that I could see developing over time. So, yeah, if you are someone that likes watching young players develop, it's going to be the season for you, I think. Let's look at the schedule, which is a really terrifying thing to look at.
Yeah.
So South Carolina just missed out on probably its best chances in a while of getting an SEC win. Um, Vanderbilt, unranked, had a couple of conference losses. Oklahoma actually got their first conference win yesterday over South Carolina, unranked. But then here's what you got coming up. You have number 5 Florida at home, number 15 Mississippi State at home. You travel to number 23 Georgia. You have number 11 Texas A&M at home. You have number 8 Kentucky at home. You have number 21 Ole Miss at home. You have number 5 Florida again at home. And then you have
That's
to
on the
look all the
road.
way till February 18th. So basically a full month before you travel to an unranked LSU team who I wouldn't say is like a guaranteed win by any stretch of the imagination, but maybe that's the next time that you feel like you got a little bit of a window. They're sitting at 1-4 in conference right now. And then Texas that week as well, also sitting at 1-4 in conference right now. Not that you're automatically going to lose all those ranked games, but certainly seems like a quite the gauntlet coming up.
Yeah, you're just hoping it's twofold. It's one, you're hoping you can get healthy by the time the schedule gets a little bit more manageable in mid-February, and you can get a few wins to just end the year on a better note. And then two, you're hoping, we talked about Colin playing pretty well. If Colin goes supernova, like he did against Auburn, he had, I think it was 25-10 against Auburn. If he's going to be that good on a given night, you can catch one of these ranked teams just because he is still one of the better players on the floor, even against those teams. But you need capital G great Colin Murray Boyles, not even just good. And that's going to be hard to find night in, night out when he's getting double teams because, without the guard play, teams know he's the guy to key in on.
I will say another silver lining, if you're looking for one, as good as Colin Murray Boyles is, from a mindset standpoint, it sometimes still feels like he's a little more tentative than he should be, given his size and strength and skill set. So I think having this season start to land more and more on his shoulders from a long-term standpoint, if you do get him back next year, could be a good thing just to develop that killer instinct or whatever, where it's like, well, just pass it into me and I'm going to finish. And we are seeing that a little bit. Over the last couple of games, I feel like you've seen moments where that flashes. Of course, he fouled out at the worst possible time yesterday, right in the midst of that 15-0 run I mentioned. So you gotta find the balance between properly aggressive and still being able to be there when you're playing that many minutes. So I don't know. It's going to be a tough watch, I think, for the rest of the season. But some reasons to be optimistic for the future. And I think so far over Lamont Paris's career here, we've seen them get better as the season goes along, minus a little bit of a tough stretch to end last year. So I don't know. Go watch some young Gamecocks develop and watch Colin Murray Boyles become a superstar.
Yeah, I think that about covers it. The women, speaking of gauntlets, in the middle of this stretch of 5 straight against top 20 teams, they are through 2. They've got the third one today against number 13 Oklahoma. You've got undefeated LSU coming in here on Thursday, and then you have a road game at number, I don't know where Tennessee is right now. They're in the top 20, and they're going there next Monday. So quite a stretch there in the middle of now. Still haven't lost since that UCLA game. Ashlyn Watkins did tear her ACL since we last talked. That was the Mississippi State game a couple days after we did our Citrus Bowl recap show. I guess how are we feeling right now about this women's team sitting at 17-1 with another big game here in a couple hours?
Yeah, I mean, definitely seems like whatever mentality they had before UCLA, which UCLA is a very good team, but of we are South Carolina, so we show up and we win, um, is gone. Like that being a given or that being taken for granted. And they've really just like walked the dog on some really good teams over this stretch. Beat Duke by double digits, beat TCU by almost 30. Uh, they beat Alabama by almost 20 just on Thursday. Handled Texas by almost 20.
Yep.
So even though the stretch ahead looks tough, and I think we will learn a little bit about them today, and of course LSU next Thursday. I think you feel pretty good about where you're at. Obviously, the Watkins injury not ideal, but it seems to me like they have reformed their identity. And your big concern now is just the same thing that happened in the UCLA game, and it could happen again. Is where do you turn when the shots go cold for a little while? But they haven't gone cold for a while, so you haven't necessarily had to deal with that so much.
Yeah, I think the thing I'm taking from these last, I guess they've played 3 since Watkins went down, 3.5 because it was early in that game against Mississippi State. Joyce Edwards is starting to look like the 5-star superstar you recruited. She had her career high 21 on Thursday, and 11 of them were in the fourth quarter to kind of put Alabama away. She looks confident. She looks more comfortable than she has been early in the year. That's kind of that thing you always hear coaches talk about where like a true freshman's not really a freshman once you get halfway through the year. Like they've played enough to not have that. And it's not to say she's perfect or won't have some growing pains, but I think you needed someone to take a really big jump when Watkins went down, just because you're losing 20 to 30 minutes of the best athlete on your team. So far, I mean, it's been 3 games. I think you're getting that from Edwards. The big worry for me is just what happens if another post player goes down and or you just have a game where you're in foul trouble. You're just not that deep in the front court. You really only have 3 players who play a lot of minutes, and you kind of just tape it together between Chloe Kitts, Sanaya Fagan, and Joyce Edwards. And even a foul trouble game, just a tightly whistled game where 2 of those 3 are in foul trouble, I'm not really sure how you navigate that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Definitely have been relying on Kitts and Fagan over this stretch to do the dirty work. Both have kind of been crucial in those rebounds and second chance opportunities and all those sorts of things. So you need both of them to stay very healthy, in addition to Edwards kind of emerging as a superstar. But still, I mean, you asked the question like, how are you feeling, or where do you stand? I mean, you still have a great chance to win the conference. So I have a great chance to make a run in March, as long as you can stay relatively healthy from here.
Yeah, I agree. And I think today's actually a very good test of kind of what I'm talking about. You've got a pretty big Oklahoma team, an Oklahoma team with an All-American center who I think's 3rd in the country in rebounding right now coming in. See how to handle today, and then obviously Thursday, college game days here, LSU's in town. It's the first time they've played each other since whatever you call that thing in Greenville last year. Um, it's going to be some fireworks on Thursday, so that's going to be a big one. But you got to get through today first, and a pretty good Oklahoma team.
Yeah, definitely some different personalities involved now, which is good. But yeah, any chance of a look ahead there? We know that those two teams definitely focus on each other and hate each other a lot. Or you think the task at hand is big enough to prevent something like that?
Yeah, I think it is. I think if they struggle today, it's more just because Oklahoma is pretty good and kind of has a size mismatch South Carolina could struggle with. I don't know if it's going to be just the mental look ahead. But I think Oklahoma is good enough to have their attention, and I expect them to win the game today at home. But I do think it's going to be a tough one.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we will talk about that again next week. Kind of keep looking towards the future with men's basketball. Baseball starts in about a month, pretty much exactly a month from today, or that weekend is opening weekend. We did find out that Ray Tanner is getting special recognition before the first pitch on that Friday of opening weekend. Obviously, he's moving on as the athletic director, but been here for what is it now? 25 years?
I mean, since he got hired, it would have been 97, so almost 30 years.
Wow. That's crazy. So anyway, that's something to come out and show up for. And then obviously the start of the Paul Maneri era on the diamond. We'll have plenty of other notes on winter workouts, on the upcoming spring portal period, any other late additions, and then obviously turning our attention to the 2026 recruiting class. Where does the time go? One kind of note there, I guess, off the top of my head, is it seems like they're starting to narrow in on a quarterback. That's Smigel. I can't think of his first name right now, but pretty big visit from him and his family last week for Junior Day, and yeah, that would be a good get, I think, if they can finish the deal over there. But we'll see. We'll be back here next week. Until then, this has been the GamecockScoop.com podcast. See ya.